Good evening and welcome to the briefing room. I'm Madhavdas G and viewers. Today we're going to be talking about how, after 108 days of war, a possible end to the Iran conflict is now in sight. The US and Iran have agreed on a framework for a peace deal, with a signing expected on Friday in Switzerland. But as diplomats know, nothing is final until it is signed. There are 5 crucial days ahead, and then there is the factor of Israel itself. Now, officially, details of this agreement remain limited, but President Donald Trump has announced an end to the American blockade of Iranian ports and has claimed that the Strait of Hormuz will reopen after the deal is signed. Iran says the tentative agreement would end fighting on all fronts, including Lebanon. Now, global leaders have welcomed this development, and Prime Minister Modi has called it an understanding that could help restore regional peace and stability. There is hope around the world, but the big question remains, will this truce really hold? President Trump, however, has announced the end of the American blockade of Iranian ports and has claimed that the Strait of Hormuz will reopen on Friday after the peace agreement is signed in Switzerland. As per Iran, the tentative deal ends fighting on all fronts, including Lebanon. Now, with these agreements coming out and world leaders hailing this understanding, what does it really mean? While there is optimism, there is also a lot of uncertainty at the same time. Now, US may have found a way of stopping the fighting, but there are questions over the future of the region that remain. Is this a historic peace deal or just a temporary pause? Is there another looming question that also, of course, is haunting many? Because what happens to Iran's nuclear program? As per the reactions of Israel leaders, can Israel live with the terms of this agreement? For Tehran, however, the problem is centered around restraining its allies such as Hezbollah, and the question about whether he can deliver lasting peace via this deal, because the deal on paper is only the beginning. The finer prints of the deal are not yet out. They're expected within the next 24 to 48 hours. But let's tell you about what we know so far as per what has happened. There needs to be an immediate ceasefire across all fronts, a 60-day truce to open the door for talks, the Strait of Hormuz to reopen, the US naval blockade will end, and billions in Iranian assets could be unfrozen with sanctions relief tied to compliance, and crucially, nuclear talks that will follow, with a final agreement, of course, being targeted for signing on the 19th of June. But another question remains, will this package deliver peace, or will it just buy time? Let's tell you the contrasting statements by the US President Trump and US Naval Force Central Command also regarding the US blockade. Now, I've seen how a statement coming in that the deal with Iran is complete and that US naval blockade is going to end, saying that ships, start your engines, let the oil flow. These have been the statements coming in from Donald Trump, the US President. However, CENT Command, which later put out its statement, has a slightly different version. They say that the blockade is to remain in effect. The pending execution of the agreement, of course, also is what this hinges on, and that these violations may trigger escalation. Don't cross till clearly instructed is what CENT Command, the US Naval Forces Central Command, is specifically stating as well. Let's also tell you about the sticking points in this peace deal regarding the Strait of Hormuz. Iran has demanded transit fees and toll protocol, while US wants freedom of navigation and toll-free movement. There's also, of course, another sticking point relating to US troop withdrawal. Iran would want US troop withdrawal from West Asia as a whole, as there are 19 major US military bases in West Asia and over 24 smaller outposts, airfields all over the region. But for US, closing these bases means abandoning allies such as Turkey, Egypt, Jordan, Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, amongst others. There's also, of course, the biggest sticking point about Iran's own nuclear stockpile. Iran has not committed to a clear plan on transferring or destroying its enriched uranium. Its stockpile is estimated at over 10,000 kilograms, including a critical 440 kilograms enriched above 60% purity. But the US demand is clear: an irreversible dismantlement of Iran's nuclear capability. And this remains one of the toughest hurdles to a final deal. Another major sticking point is that of Lebanon and what happens to Hezbollah. While Iran wants guarantees for protection of Hezbollah and Lebanon's sovereignty with a complete halt to Israel operations, the US says it cannot dictate Israel's military objectives. There's another key sticking point, which is Iran's frozen assets. While Iran wants the immediate release of $12 billion in frozen funds held in Qatar, but the US position is different. They say no money without proof of nuclear dismantlement. Washington wants removal of nuclear materials and strict verification before any funds are to be released. Israel, however, might turn out to be the biggest thorn for US in this entire peace deal, as Netanyahu is pretty clear about his demands vis-a-vis Iran. What have they said? The first red flag is the very fact that nuclear talks have been deferred. The second red flag is the security terms are unclear. There's also, of course, the flag that missile program at the moment remains untouched. There's also, of course, Hezbollah still being armed, which is an issue of concern, and Israel's goals have not been met yet from Israel's perspective. Let's also tell you about what Israel authorities have said about this deal. Israel authorities have said that the agreement does not bind on us. They've also said that Israel is not a banana republic. And this is the National Security Minister. What has the Israel Defense Minister, Israel Katz, said? IDF to stay in the security zones. That's the clear statement coming in. Pressure won't change our stand as well. There's also, of course, the statement coming in from Israel's finance minister. That is Bezalel Smotrich. The deal is bad for Israel and the world at large, is what he has stated as well, and that Israel is free to pursue its own goals as far as Iran is concerned. Now, this, of course, is a very, very important aspect of what has transpired in terms of the entire conflict in Iran. A short while earlier also spoke to former war advisor to the White House, Robert Pape. Listen into this conversation. And joining us on what we can expect in coming weeks and months is Robert Pape, who's, of course, a former advisor to the White House on war. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Pape. Let me begin by asking you, when US and Iran appear to be inching closer to a peace deal that would halt attacks, reopen the Strait of Hormuz, and end the blockade, as well as sanctions on Iran, are you hopeful about these latest developments? And do you believe that this agreement is more robust and less fragile, perhaps, than previous attempts?
Well, I'm actually quite concerned that there's a tremendous amount of disagreement between the United States and Iran about what the agreement means. So we're in a situation where we don't even know, and there's so much uncertainty about this, that we don't actually have the agreement in front of us. And we are hearing pretty strong reports from each side about what's in the agreement, and they don't agree. President Trump says that the agreement means that the Straits of Hormuz will be permanently open, that the oil will flow free essentially forever, and there are no strings attached. No payments will be made to Iran a la Obama. Whereas what we're hearing from Iran, the deputy foreign minister, the foreign ministry's office, now in multiple statements, is that Iran is expecting, number one, there will be $12 billion of funds transferred to Iran essentially on Friday, on the opening of the signing. Number two, that there will be discussion here of significant troop withdrawals by the United States in short order. And they're also explaining, the foreign ministry, that the tolls, this is not going to be free forever. It's not a permanent free opening, that there will be fees that will be charged starting about day 60, somewhere around day 60 of this agreement. So these are very, very different views of what's occurring in this. So I would say that this creates enormous uncertainty. And then there's the wild card of Israel. So Iran has said over and over again, including in these statements I just mentioned, that Israel has to end its war in Lebanon, essentially withdraw from the territory that it has occupied. Right. Well, Israel is saying, no way, it's not going to do that. And so you end up with Israel as a giant curveball here. And so essentially you have a memorandum of disagreement that is occurring. And even if we can get to Friday and initial something, what is the thing that we've actually agreed on is just very, very unclear. And what we need both sides to not just have the same piece of paper, but agree that they both interpret that piece of paper in the same way. And so this is the problem with the uncertainty with the agreement.
I'm going to come to each of those points that you mentioned, each of those sticking points one by one, because, let me start first with the Strait of Hormuz, because how much do you think this issue could persist if there are two very different perceptions of what's happening, and how far can it potentially derail the peace efforts, because there's no clarity over who's going to control the Strait of Hormuz itself?
Well, it could persist for months, and here's the reason why. You see, even if the Hormuz, the ships begin to move, it will take months for that oil to start to be pumped out, mines to be cleared. It will take months for those ships to get loaded and then make their transit. So even in the best case scenario, it will take 60 days before ships really start to hit their new refineries, the refineries. Well, in that period of time, the oil inventory drawdown that has created this panic is going to continue. So what are we going to live on in this 2-month period while we're waiting are the cushions, the oil inventories, the gas already in the gas tank. Well, that's going to be empty in about 60 days. That's what has created this flurry of panic we're in right now. All the oil inventory experts in the world agree on this. Somewhere around August 1st, maybe it's the 25th of July, August 7th, we're hitting empty in those gas tanks.
Right.
What that's going to do is it's going to increase leverage by Iran. So Iran's leverage is going to go up because any little disruption there after the gas tank is empty, the cushions are gone, has much more dramatic, immediate effects. Right now, we don't feel those effects. We know the price has gone up, but it's not abrupt.
Right.
After August, you're going to have much more leverage by Iran. So these issues where Trump is saying, oh, no problem, Iran, you just suck it up. You just accept what I'm giving you.
Right.
Well, this is going to start to change over the coming months.
All right. Let's get on to Lebanon, which is another very important sticking point. And we really don't know what has been agreed specifically as far as Lebanon is concerned. You yourself mentioned Israel's role because there's no sign of it withdrawing from southern Lebanon, which is making the current negotiations quite fragile. Do you believe that Israel will ultimately agree to pull back from its military operations in Lebanon? Because there are statements coming in from top ministers who are not quite happy with this deal that's been announced between US and Iran, and they're saying that Israel will be free to pursue its own path.
I think there's no realistic chance Israel's going to pull back because it's not just Israeli politicians or Netanyahu, but somewhere around 3/4 of Israel's population supports this move. So, and there are elections coming in Israel in the fall as well, where Netanyahu is actually among, I wouldn't call him exactly a moderate, but he's not out in front of his public. If anything, the public is out in front of Netanyahu. And that's what you're seeing in these statements by the political leaders in Israel. So the odds of Israel actually abandoning this territory in Lebanon is very low. And therefore, the tensions here, the fighting it's not just the current territory. Israel's going to want to expand its control to get a security buffer into Beirut, if not even beyond that. So this whole issue is not stable, and Iran has directly linked the peace in the Gulf to the issues in Lebanon. Okay. We can keep ignoring this and say, well, Iran will just suck it up. But I think this is just not reading the situation correctly. Iran has, if anything, expanded its protection of Hezbollah as its power has grown. It hasn't shrunk back to narrow its objectives. And so I think this is a big problem as we go forward.
All right. I also want to ask you what this would mean if Israel continues with this plan, if it continues with the hostilities in Lebanon, because we've seen how Trump and Netanyahu themselves have had, all sorts of heated exchanges. There's also been, the question then about the future of the U.S.-Israel relationship comes into the spotlight, because will the U.S. then continue to fully rally behind Israel if it decides to escalate the war?
Well, right now, President Trump is trying to put some verbal pressure on Israel to pull back. But the real pressure that the United States has, which it is not using, is cutting off military and economic aid. If President Trump would go that far, then he might be able to militarily contain Israel. I don't think Trump will do that because Trump is running into the midterms where a lot of his supporters would not want that to happen and would stay home if that happens. So I think that Israel is likely to go on. And then the way this could more immediately directly connect to the rest of the region would be through the Houthis. The Houthis have already announced that and they've done this before against Israel with the Red Sea in 2024 and 25. They could start to shut down more shipping in the Red Sea. What is that shipping? It's going to influence insurance rates related to the oil that's now coming out. And then Iran, of course, can shut down more shipping here as it goes through the Persian Gulf. So as I see it, the issue with Lebanon and Israel has a way to unwind this in multiple different ways. And the bottom line is, I don't see President Trump putting any material pressure on Israel. And without that, I don't think they're going to stop.
All right. And what are the chances, in your view, that the Trump administration will be able to secure a nuclear deal that's significantly superior to the one under the Obama administration? Or do you expect it to largely follow a similar framework? Because that's something that's also been left to the larger 60-day negotiations.
Well, at the moment, I'm not seeing any sign that they're heading to even a framework that looks like the JCPOA. So I think that's giving, and we have to remember the $12 billion that Iran wants is almost 10 times as much as the $1.7 billion that Obama gave to. So already this is worse than the JCPOA. President Trump, by his own terms, is talking about taking some out, diluting some of the enriched uranium. Already this is worse than the JCPOA just by President Trump's own terms. So I think, though, that even to get to that point, what President Trump is talking about, this is a far nowhere do we see any details of enforcement, anything hard-edged here that would give you confidence we're going to get to even what President Trump is talking about.
Right. We're also talking about a situation where, if the entire sanctions against Iran are defreezed, we're looking at Iran with an ability to trade, more easily, perhaps in this post-war situation. How will that, once the frozen international assets, etc., are released, alter the regional power equations in West Asia, given that China is also challenging U.S. hegemony in the region? How do you see the Iran-China partnership then capitalizing on the situation?
Well, what it means is that Iran is going to continue on its path to gain regional power. It can use those funds to directly support its missiles, directly support its drones, directly support the Houthis, support Hezbollah. There's nothing in these agreements to stop that. And what that means is a counterbalance to Israel that thought it was going to be the regionally dominant power. So you're going to end up with a situation where that triangle, Iran, the United States, and Israel is going to continue to be a problem. And from China's perspective, this is fantastic because it means America is stuck in this escalation trap, as I call it, for months and months more, which only helps China go about its merry way to become the #1 power in the world. So China's becoming more and more powerful as a result of the situation relative to America. And so is Iran becoming more powerful relative to America. and to Israel.
Right.
So as you look at this, there is a marriage made in heaven between Iran and China, which are not likely to break anytime soon.
Right. And lastly, I must ask you the larger question. In India, there's a huge heated debate over the killing of 3 Indian sailors in a U.S. attack on a vessel off the coast of Oman. Now, there are multiple incidents of attacks on Indian ships that have been reported, and this has created fresh friction between U.S. and China. We've seen the chargé d'affaires being summoned by the Indian Ministry of External Affairs. How do you see the U.S.-India relationship progressing in the aftermath of such attacks, especially as PM Modi is also expected to meet President Trump at the upcoming G7 meeting in France?
Well, I'm expecting this to be quite a key issue in the meeting between Trump and Modi. And I think that what India likely should want is a direct promise from Trump that whatever happens in these negotiations with Iran, that the United States will not attack future ships with India involved, that it gives India a pass. I would encourage a lot of this to be done bilaterally now, because the description I just painted for you of this triangle of what's about to happen over the next few months in Hormuz and in the Middle East, this is going to be a mess for a long time to come. The only way to even diminish this at all is for your prime minister to try to ask for a bypass, a pass to get out of this altogether, and whatever that is. So what do you want President Trump to not attack an India-related ship over the next 6 months? What do you want?
All right. We'll have to see how those negotiations really work out and what really can take place as far as those key meetings is concerned. Robert Pape, thanks so much for joining us and explaining that all of that for our viewers. Thank you so much indeed.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.